Theme 4. Health and Lifestyles. Gap filling. Reading 1. Health and the body. Keeping fit and staying healthy have, not surprisingly, become a growth industry. Quite apart from the amount of money spent each year on doctors' prescriptions and approved medical treatment, huge sums are now spent on health foods and remedies of various kinds, from vitamin pills to mineral water, not to mention health clubs and keep fit books and videos. We are more concerned than ever, it seems, about the water we drink and the air we breathe, and are smoking less, though not yet drinking less alcohol. This does not appear to mean that coughs and sneezes have been banished, or that we can all expect to live to 100. To give a personal example, one of my friends, who is a keep fit fanatic, a non-smoker, and teetotaler, and who is very particular about what he eats, is at present languishing in bed with a wrist in plaster and a badly sprained ankle. Part of his healthy lifestyle is to play squash every day after work, and that accounts for the ankle. He also cycles everywhere, and if you have ever tried to cycle through the rush hour traffic with a sprained ankle, you will understand how he acquired the broken wrist. For health, it seems not just a matter of good diet and plenty of exercise. Too much exercise can be harmful, as many joggers have discovered. Eating the right food can easily become an obsession, as can overworking, which you might have to do so as to be able to afford your membership for the squash club, your mountain bike, your health food, and a few holidays in peaceful and healthy places. Theme 4. Health and Lifestyles. Gap filling. Reading 2. The language of tears. The ability to weep is a uniquely human form of emotional response. Some scientists have suggested that human tears are evidence of an aquatic past, but this does not seem very likely. We cry from the moment we enter this world for a number of reasons. Helpless babies cry to persuade their parents that they are ill, hungry, or uncomfortable. As they develop, they will also cry just to attract parental attention, and will often stop when they get it. The idea that having a good cry does you good is a very old one, and now it has scientific validity since recent research into tears has shown that they contain a natural painkiller called enkephalin. By fighting sorrow and pain, this chemical helps you feel better. Weeping can increase the quantities of enkephalin you produce. Unfortunately, in our society, we impose restrictions upon this naturally healing activity. Because some people still regard it as a sign of weakness in men, boys in particular are admonished when they cry. This kind of repression can only increase stress, both emotionally and physically. Tears of emotion also help the body rid itself of toxic chemical waste, for there is more protein in them than in tears resulting from cold winds or other irritants. Crying comforts and calms people, and can be very enjoyable. Consider the popularity of highly emotional films, which are commonly called weepies. It seems that people enjoy crying together almost as much as laughing together. Theme 4. Health and Lifestyles. Reading Comprehension. Reading 1. The first 2 decades of this century were dominated by the microbe hunters. These hunters had tracked down one after another of the microbes responsible for the most dreaded scourges of many centuries: tuberculosis, cholera, diphtheria. But there remain some terrible diseases for which no microbe could be incriminated. Scurvy, pellagra, rickets, beriberi. Then it was discovered that these diseases were caused by the lack of vitamins, a trace substance in the diet. The diseases could be prevented or cured by consuming foods that contained the vitamins. And so, in the decades of the 1920s and 1930s, nutrition became a science, and the vitamin hunters replaced the microbe hunters. In the 1940s and 1950s, biochemists tried to learn why each of the vitamins was essential for health. They discovered that key enzymes in metabolism depend on one or another of the vitamins as coenzymes to perform the chemistry that provides cells with energy for growth and function. Now these enzyme hunters occupied center stage. You are aware that the enzyme hunters have been replaced by a new breed of hunters who are tracking genes, the blueprints for each of the enzymes, and are discovering the defective genes that cause inherited diseases, diabetes and cystic fibrosis. These gene hunters, or genetic engineers, use recombinant DNA technology to identify and clone genes and introduce them into bacterial cells and plants to create factories for the massive production of hormones and vaccines for medicine and for better crops for agriculture. Biotechnology has become a multi-billion-dollar industry. In view of the inexorable progress in science, we can expect that the gene hunters will be replaced in the spotlight. When and by whom? Which kind of hunter will dominate the scene in the last decade of our waning century and in the early decades of the next? I wonder whether the hunters who will occupy the spotlight will be the neurobiologists who apply the techniques of the enzyme and gene hunters to the functions of the brain. What to call them? The headhunters? I will return to them later. Theme 4. Health and Lifestyles. Reading Comprehension. Reading 2. The healing power of maggots is not new. Human beings have discovered it several times. The Maya are said to have used maggots for therapeutic purposes 1,000 years ago, as early as the 16th century. European doctors noticed that soldiers with maggot-infested wounds healed well. More recently, doctors have realized that maggots can be cheaper and more effective than drugs in some respects, and these squirming larvae have, at times, enjoyed a quite medical renaissance. The problem may have more to do with the weak stomachs of those using them than with good science. The modern heyday of maggot therapy began during World War I, when an American doctor named William Bayer was shocked to notice that 2 soldiers who had lain on a battlefield for a week while their abdominal wounds became infested with thousands of maggots had recovered better than wounded men treated in the military hospital. After the war, Bayer proved to the medical establishment that maggots could cure some of the toughest infections. In the 1930s, hundreds of hospitals used maggot therapy. Maggot therapy requires the right kind of larvae. Only the maggots of blowflies, a family that includes common bluebottles and greenbottles, will do the job. They devour dead tissue, whether in an open wound or in a corpse. Some other maggots, on the other hand, such as those of the screwworm, eat live tissue. They must be avoided. When blowfly eggs hatch in a patient's wound, the maggots eat the dead flesh, where gangrene-causing bacteria thrive. They also excrete compounds that are lethal to bacteria they don't happen to swallow. Meanwhile, they ignore live flesh, and in fact give it a gentle growth-stimulating massage simply by crawling over it. When they metamorphose into flies, they leave without a trace, although in the process they might upset the hospital staff as they squirm around in a live patient. When sulfur drugs, the first antibiotics, emerged around the time of World War II, maggot therapy quickly faded into obscurity.